Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Library of Michigan with the Michigan Department of Education's webinar on Read by Grade 3, What Libraries Need to Know. I'm happy to introduce our panelists today. They are Laurel Treibel and Lisa Brown. They're both early literacy coaching consultants at the Michigan Department of Education Office of Educational Supports. So welcome, Laurel and Lisa. We're going to get started here with today's goals. And on this slide, you can see that we have a couple of goals listed, as well as a bit.ly link at the bottom left-hand corner there to today's slides. So our first goal is to articulate and understand the Read by Grade 3 law to support young learners, families, and stakeholders. That is for you, all of our participants today, to be able to go back to your libraries and articulate and have a good understanding of Read by Grade 3. And we also want to demonstrate how libraries can use Every Child Ready to Read and introduce you to the GELN, Early Literacy Essential Practices, and how those can both help you at your public library support the Read by Grade 3 law. So here's our Department of Education, and I'm going to let Laurel and Lisa say hello here.
Hello, everybody. This is Lisa Brown. And at the Michigan Department of Education, it's our vision that every learner in Michigan public schools will have an inspiring, engaging, and caring learning environment that fosters creative and critical thinkers who believe in their ability to positively influence Michigan and the world beyond. Can we move on to the next slide?
Sorry, yep, I was muted there. I was just going to give Laurel a chance to say hi too. But
oh, I'm so sorry. Go ahead, Laurel.
Hi, this is Laurel Treibel. Nice to join you guys today and looking forward to talking about some of the things we have going on around early literacy in regards to Read by Grade 3.
Great, thank you. So here's our roadmap, and I think Lisa's going to talk for a second about how this affects Read by Grade 3 and the Michigan Department of Education.
Thank you, Kathy and Laurel. So what you see on your screen is 7 goals. There's also 44 objectives that go along with the state's strategic plan. And essentially, it's Michigan's roadmap to becoming a top 10 in 10 state. And if you look at these goals and read through them, it is our hope that you as Michigan librarians will be able to find yourself within the goals. And literacy is really woven sort of throughout as it connects directly with instruction and 2 in the classroom, as well as 5 with our connection to parents as partners. So again, this is our state-specific plan, and literacy is clearly woven throughout.
And this is Kathy again. I'll just add that public libraries, we really, here at the Library of Michigan, we work under this roadmap as well. One of our tie-ins is to number 4 here with the use of MEL.org. You know, our Michigan e-library gives equal access to e-resources throughout the state of Michigan. We also support parents and caregivers, so that's a large part of number 5 here on this list, engaging them in learning at the public libraries. And finally, public libraries are community partners, so you know, number 6 there is a way we can also factor into the roadmap for MDE. All right, Laurel.
So just to give you an idea of why there's so much urgency around literacy in the state of Michigan currently, you're taking a look at kind of a snapshot of where Michigan ranks nationally based on national assessment scores. And currently where we sit, 34% of our students are at or above proficient in reading according to the national assessment, which means we have a lot of students who need a lot of support and need to continue to be exposed to what libraries have to offer, as well as receive good core instruction and intervention that's research supported in the classroom. So you're looking at the most recent scores from 2017. These scores only come out every few years. Michigan currently is at the bottom of the list. If we were to be ranked nationally, we are towards the bottom quarter. So that gives you just an idea of why the focus on literacy in regards to the Read by Grade 3 law, as well as the literacy focus that we'll be sharing with you from the General Education Leadership Network.
All right, so here you can see that, the percentage change in public school librarians has definitely decreased here in Michigan. And the number today, we've lost something closer to 90% of our school librarians, but you can see in the bottom left corner here that the per pupil funding has actually increased in public schools here in Michigan. And so a lot of that funding is going to literacy coaches. And I do know that the current proposed budget from the governor is to triple the amount spent in schools for literacy coaches. And I'm sure Laurel and Lisa can speak a little bit more to what a literacy coach does, if they want to cover that real brief.
Sure. Well, right now in the state of Michigan, the legislator has invested in providing some funding for early literacy coaches at the intermediate school district level. And we are so excited to be part of that work in collaboration with MAISA. And right now, every ISD has an early literacy coach. And while the day-to-day functions of an early literacy coach looks different depending on their context, their role has really been to provide literacy support in their region around the essential instructional practices in early and elementary literacy, specifically in many cases around the K-3 instructional practices. And Laurel's gonna be talking a little bit more with us later on about those documents. Laurel, what would you add? Anything to that?
No, I think you covered it well, Lisa. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Lisa. And I believe this is you as well, Lisa.
So our goal today is to give you, an overview of the Read by Grade 3 legislation, as Kathy had mentioned in the earlier slides. So really, there's some main components of the law itself. So the first component is about, at the heart of this really is core reading instruction, and in providing research-aligned practices in the classroom. And that really goes along too with providing research-based interventions for those students that are struggling. We also have an assessment component piece. So every student in grades K through 3, including young 5s, according to the law, will be given an opportunity to take assessments within the assessment system. So the first of those will occur in 30 days. And the results from those assessments will help to determine what areas of support students needs, and then hopefully also where their strengths are. So if a student is showing that they are in need of supports, in need of intervention, then the school will develop something called a reading improvement plan. And I know many of you at your libraries, at your schools, are probably familiar with reading improvement plans. The intent of the reading improvement plan is to really outline the interventions and supports that a student might need. Another component of the law is the family engagement. So how are we engaging families to support around literacy needs? And so a lot of you in libraries are already working hard on family engagement. Another component is summer reading, and Laurel's going to talk to you a little bit more about the summer reading piece that we've been working on with the coaches. But essentially, many schools have the option to focus on summer reading outside of the school year to help, again, remedy those deficiencies, increase motivation and engagement for literacy, and some involve the parent component as well. And then another portion of the law is around professional learning. So Kathy invited us to speak a little bit about the coaches. Coaches offer the job embedded professional learning for educators and leaders around the practices. So as we're all working as a state to better understand what research practice looks like in the classroom, we have coaches that are there to help and support. Also, principals are taking leadership roles in looking at the data from the individual reading improvement plans to help identify what might be some specific needs at schools. And so we'll learn a little bit more about some of the components that are in the essential instructional practices and how those align to what many of us might see as the big five. And then if you're looking for some support around Read by Grade 3, specifically, if you really want to dig into the law, we do have a live link here that takes you to the MDE Read by Grade 3 guide. And all of these these are meant to look like books that you see in front of you. Those are all hyperlinked, and they'll take you down to the different areas of the guide. So if you wanted to click on intervention, for example, that'll just drop you down to the guide for this section that covers, intervention. So this is part of our technical assistance for the specific parts of the Read by Grade 3 legislation.
All right, thank you, Lisa. And Laurel, you were going to dive into the GELN resources here.
Yes. So prior to the Read by Grade 3 law, GELN, the General Education Leadership Network, which is a subgroup of MAISA, got together and created the Early Literacy Task Force to focus on research-supported instructional practices in the classroom. And that group, as they initially came together to talk about literacy coaching, and from there moved into developing the essential instructional practices in early literacy, beginning with kindergarten to third grade, moving to pre-kindergarten, and then back to grades 4 and 5. They also have developed a literacy leadership document as well as essential coaching practices for elementary literacy that helps frame and guide the support of this work. Currently, there is a Birth to 3 document that has just been approved from Early Literacy Task Force to go to GELN for review. And at the upper end, there is a 612 task force group, and there is a 612 document. That group is focused on secondary and specifically disciplinary literacy. So Michigan will very soon have a Birth to 12 continuum for essential practices in the classroom for that research-supported instruction that specifically the law calls out, but we know is greater than the Read by Grade 3 law. So what you see in front of you are the resources that they offer, and all of that work and the modules that go along with K-3 and pre-K for teachers to learn more about the research and what these practices look like in action is all housed on our literacyessentials.org website. So there's a whole body of work that goes along with this piece, and Kathy's bringing up the website. It's always helpful to kind of see that homepage. And so as you see across the top, you can go to all of the essentials documents. When you click into, let's say, the K-3 document, you have the opportunity to get into the document itself as a PDF. You can access the modules, which are all housed on Michigan Virtual and are free to educators to be able to learn more deeply for classroom teachers or anyone who is heavily involved with literacy around what this really does look like in the classroom. So that resource has been developed. As we move on to the next slide, you're going to see a piece of the document itself. So the legislation calls out specifically the big five, as you will see on the right-hand side of the screen: phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, comprehension, and vocabulary. Those are the components that by law districts need to assess students on and should make up part of their reading improvement plans. On the left-hand side in the white box, you're going to see an excerpt from the Essential Literacy Practices K3, which has defined for us, we know that literacy, knowledge, and skills predict later literacy achievement in those grades. But we also know that including the big five, there are all these other pieces that are really important to the development of literacy in students. So as we move forward with the Read by Grade 3 work at law, legislation, and as well as the GELN task force work, it's important to be able to look at both and know that there's more, as you know, to literacy than just what's called out in the legislation. So when we start thinking about building broad content knowledge in students, that's not necessarily represented in the legislation, but it's a very, very important part of what we know students need to grow as readers and writers. Motivation and engagement is not called out specifically in the legislation, but another very, very important space. So that gives you an idea on how the essential practices include all of the law components, but are broader and really focus on a larger aspect of literacy for students.
Thank you, Laurel. And definitely those that have been around in the public library world for quite a while can remember the original 6 practices of Every Child Ready to Read, which are awfully familiar to those on the last page for the big 5 of the Read by Grade 3 literacy components. You know, they were phonological awareness, vocabulary, letter knowledge, etc. So now we have our second version of Every Child Ready to Read, which of course is talk, sing, read, write, and play. And it's been really fun working with folks in the Michigan Department of Ed to see how similar these are to the literacy essentials, just that public libraries have been using a different language, so to speak, on early literacy. It's also important to remember that early literacy in public libraries is often thought about as kind of that 0 to 5 age range. It's when we're talking about early literacy at the Public Library Association conference, that's often what the ages they're focusing on. But for our public schools here in Michigan, early literacy means ages 0 through 8, right through about 3rd grade there. So just definitely keep that in mind when you're talking with your local educators and you're talking about early literacy. They are referring to that lower grade school age as well as those under 5. So in the fall of 2016, the pre-kindergarten essential instruction practices in early literacy were released, and you can see some of those listed out on the right-hand side. And on the left-hand side of your screen, of course, we have talk, sing, read, write, and play. And all of our participants here have been pretty quiet, but we want to make sure you open up your chat box there and select the 2 all panelists and attendees option in the chat box so that you can help participate right now. So we're going to chat about these 5 practices of Every Child Ready to Read and how they relate to the literacy essentials. So I'm going to jump out here to the document. I actually already had it pulled up here. So if we look here, this is the pre-kindergarten essential instructional practices. And that's, of course, the age group that we are working a lot with. I believe there is a 0 to 3 essentials guide that will be coming out in the near future. But we have here the pre-K one. And if you take a look here, I'm going to actually zoom in so those of you can read on your screens. We have reading and writing. Here's the literacy artifacts in dramatic play for number 1. So reading and writing materials are not the only thing we want present in the classroom, right? So what do we do in public libraries? This is where you guys are going to come in with the chat box there that encourages that dramatic play. Any suggestions? Taking a look at this, what do you do already in the libraries? I'll give you guys a second to type. Up, here they come. Puppets, dress up play area. I love those dress up play areas. Read a picture book, then act it out. That's great, yep. Kitchen play area. Kitchen area at sensory day. Those are all great suggestions. We're gonna jump down here to another one. Let's go to vocabulary here, number 3. So what are we doing in public libraries for vocabulary focus? If you take a look at this on number 3, maybe in those early literacy play kitchens, you've been labeling some of those areas. Word of the week display. Ooh, I like that. Audiobooks, Fancy Nancy, XD. What is XD? Want to explain that? Storytime discussion about the words in the books. All great. I don't want to take up too much time with this, so I'm going to move down here. Let's go to extending conversation. These are things that educators are using in the classroom, in the pre-K classroom specifically. What are we doing in public libraries to extend conversation? And I'll read the chat box. Oh, it's getting quiet in the chat box. People are thinking, ask questions. Talk and ask questions while reading books. Chat up kids in the library. Imaginative play. What's on a page, talking about more than just the story. Follow up on the books they've checked out. Even just asking kids what they're going to be doing today, that's a great one. And don't forget, when you're having these conversations and extending conversations with children, that you need to give the very young ample time to respond. It takes them a good 5 seconds to formulate a response to a question. So don't take their quietness as a hint of shyness. They might just be trying to come up with their response for you. Flint Public Library also mentioned picture walks. That's great. Yep. So as you can see here, I don't want to take up too much time with this, but if you take a good close look at these essential instruction practices, you can download them from literacyessentials.org. You can see how they really tie into those 5 practices of every child ready to read. So that was just a quick exploration of that. And we're going to jump into our next slide here on summer reading. And Laurel, did you want to start this one?
Yes.
Great.
So as Lisa mentioned earlier, she talked a little bit about literacy coaches. Every ISD has an ISD literacy coach, and part of the support that they have is continued professional learning directly from researchers around literacy. And one of the areas that has been a focus the last couple of years is actually based on the book you see on your screen, No More Summer Reading Loss, Not This But That. And this book has got a research base, but it's also got a practitioner piece to it. So folks who are using the research and putting it to work in their districts or in their classrooms are able to share what their journeys and their stories are. So one of the pieces we wanted to share from here was actually based on the research on keeping kids active in the summer with literacy. And there were some specific guidelines for for libraries in this space, so everyone has a little bit of a different lens. So some of the suggestions, many which you probably are already doing and have had conversations about, creating partnerships with schools to ensure print books and audiobooks are accessible for all students. I know many public libraries come into elementary buildings and they talk up their summer reading programs. There's lots of things that happen currently statewide. Collaborating with teachers on a schedule for librarians to showcase specific titles or genres throughout the summer. So again, having that partnership with the schools, because there may be some content specific things that teachers think would be great for students to have access to over the summer, or they've learned about the motivation and engagement aspect of their students and can offer some of that to the public libraries. One of the other suggestions from this resource was to create a checkout system so that themed book bags can be checked out by students from the local schools. We know that building vocabulary is a huge piece of what we need students to do, as well as building content knowledge. And much of that happens from reading themed book sets. So when we have text sets where students are able to interact with the same vocabulary over and over and content in a different way, they build both vocabulary as well as their content knowledge, which is part of the essential instructional practices work. So those are just a few ideas that directly relate to public libraries. And also, as it sits in the reading legislation and Read by Grade 3, there is room for, or suggested for, summer reading camp. So this is another great support that libraries can provide to districts, in collaboration with districts, I should say.
Thank you. So while you were speaking, I asked folks to share some of their ideas in the chat box on what they are currently already doing to collaborate with their local schools on summer reading. So just a couple of the responses, for example, early 5th through 3rd grade classes actually come to the library for summer reading club visits, regular story times at community education program centers. There's also one library is mentioning Connect Ed, where their students are able to access the resources at the library using their student ID number. Some libraries are calling that the One Card as well. March's Reading Month tours, attending school events to share out summer reading club information. And this last one I'll read is, we visit school-based daycare in the summer and read chapter books to over 70 students a week. These are all great ideas. So keep talking in the chat box there. I'm going to go on to our next slide. Some other ways that libraries can support students and families with Read by Grade 3. I think you'll all find that your library is already doing a lot of these things. You're already making a lot of these efforts that will support Read by Grade 3. The law language can be kind of scary, which is why Lisa and Laurel have been on here today to break it down for us real straightforward. So some of the things we can do is always, of course, offer a wide range of books and other texts. So keep chatting in that chat box. Feel free to share your ideas. How might you share a different part of your collection with students? And of course, I always encourage nonfiction book displays, diverse books, literacy-based play. We talked a bit about that on one of our previous slides, but pairing programs with books. So for example, if you do a Lego time, maybe you can go through your nonfiction collection and pull out one week for Lego time. You maybe are focusing on dinosaurs and you can pull out all your nonfiction dinosaur books and your fiction. Maybe another week you're working on airplanes and you can get out World War II plane books and such and share those. Lots of great ideas are coming in on the comments here. Parents love grade level book lists that include fiction and nonfiction combined. Every program activity event, we hold and promote the appropriate books to go with it. So for example, craft books, Lego books, clay play, All great ideas. What else can we do to support Read by Grade 3? Of course, we can focus back on some of those big practices of sounds and vocabulary and letters. So we can, of course, continue to promote our books that rhyme. Poetry. April's Poetry Month, so now's your chance to really do a great sound display on rhyming words and poetry. You can create a word board for vocabulary. Somebody earlier mentioned that they have a word of a week display, and that's really, really fun. If you don't have time to redo a display every week, you can do a word of the month. So Diane's saying we have special programs based on books. We had live goats for the 3 Billy Goat Gruff program, and are having live llamas visit for Llama Llama Red Pajama. So Diane, I want to come to that. That sounds like a lot of fun. So lots of things that we're already doing to support Read by Grade 3, but of course lots of ideas that we can grow on. So how can we continue to support students and families? With great programming that we're already doing, but also don't forget the Public Library Association's Family Engagement Initiative is available online. And we want to continue to build those relationships with the schools. And I believe Lisa had mentioned the reading ladders. And so this is kind of a fun idea. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, Lisa?
Yeah. So in our, we've offered several 4-day institutes for learning around the essential instructional practices for K-3. Those institutes are provided from our research partners, and we've been able to reach over 700 educators and literacy leaders throughout the state. And one of the concepts that Dr. Nell K. Duke talks about is this idea of reading ladders or book ladders. And in conversation, Kathy and Laurel and I thought that this might be something of interest, as librarians. So the idea is that, oftentimes kids come in and they're interested in books like Diary of a Wimpy Kid, or maybe they want to read a book that has a catchy cover because it has like Beyonce on the front. This is an example that Nell actually uses in her presentation. So the idea is to entertain what students are interested in reading, right? The library is their chance to come in and find a book that interests them and really engage with it. And then, when they're reading these books that they're interested in, as librarians, that library like the back of your hand, right? So you might look at this book and say, okay, this is a really great book, but I also know a book that might be a step up from this book that the child is interested in. When I mean a step up, I mean like climbing the ladder of quality around, that this author is super reputable and it has like a common theme. So maybe, for example, if we were reading a book about Beyonce, and this is probably a very poor example because I don't know a ton about Beyonce, right? But maybe there's a common theme in her family life and you pick up on that because you've read the book and you can say, okay, but maybe there's a similar theme to another historical figure, right? Another female historical figure. And so you kind of help the student climb this ladder, and we call it a reading ladder or book ladder. And then what would be maybe a step from that in text quality and theme quality? So we if you can just visualize a ladder and then sort of like this way of getting to richer text, but you start really with where a child is interested. And we love that because we're honoring, again, that motivation engagement, but then we're using our literacy expertise to help kids explore other options and maybe characters and stories or themes that they otherwise may not have been interested in without some guidance and suggestions. And someone wrote, superhero books can lead to books about real heroes. That is exactly what I'm talking about. I think you could have done this slide. This is pretty much exactly what I was trying to say. That's a perfect
Yeah.
example. And I think even the book Captain Underpants was one that was used as a book letter example.
Right. And of course, a lot of times we'll call them read-alikes in the library world. And so like if you want to make sure on your library homepage that you have links to the Michigan E-Library's novel list K through 12, put up displays, book packs, you know, we can definitely encourage kids to read what they enjoy. And as Lisa said, it helps them climb those rungs. They're not going to skip a rung in their literacy if they're interested, and they can build up. And that kind of leads us to our next slide, where I'm going to do a stop share and give the mouse over to Laurel so that she can bring up the video here. But we had quite a discussion between Lisa, Laurel, and I on guided reading levels, because I think all of our public librarians can agree that they've experienced a couple of times where parents come in and they're just definitely looking for a level K book, and they don't want to miss out on that. So Laura's going to share a little video that talks about guided level reading.
So, so while Laurel is setting up the video for us, this is also part of the training where Dr. Nell K. Duke talks about small group instruction and how we group students, right? So it's very common throughout Michigan to group students for instructional purposes around reading levels. And so Dr. Duke is going to share with us in her video a little bit about that and explore some other ways to group students. And then we're hoping that this might help at least start some discussion or help you navigate situations in where you may feel that you're sort of pressured into pointing kids in just to one direction in the library, right, based on their level. So here it goes.
Here are some of the reasons why we think you shouldn't use only level-based grouping. First, levels are very approximate. It's just not the case that a child who tests at a level E is going to consistently read at a level E. If the child has a lot of interest in a text, the child might read at a higher level. If the child has a lot of background knowledge related to the text, the child might read at a higher level. The child might read at a higher level if that child had a better breakfast that morning. Because we have to have some humility about levels, we have to recognize that they're very approximate, we also need to recognize that they probably shouldn't always form the basis of our grouping. Another reason why we think we shouldn't use only level-based grouping is that students can be at the same level for very different reasons and thus need different instruction. For example, you might have a child reading at a level F who has very strong word recognition that sort of helps them compensate for relatively weak meaning construction skills. You might have another child who has fairly weak word reading but is able to use strong meaning construction skills to sort of bootstrap that problem. So these two children need very different instruction. One needs more focus on meaning construction skills, the other needs more focus on word reading skill. And if we always place them in the same level, we miss the opportunity for that very targeted instruction that they need. Another reason why we think we shouldn't use only level-based groups is because it means that students who are reading below grade level never get to grapple with grade level text. And we want children to have the opportunity to grapple with grade level text in a supported environment, a small group of peers with the teacher with lots of scaffolding. It's so important that they have that opportunity, particularly as they approach third grade state testing, at which they're going to be confronted with lots of passages that are at their grade level. Another reason why we think we shouldn't use only level-based grouping is because there are some research studies that draw into question the need to always match the text level to the reader. For example, there's some research on dyad reading, which is a form of partner reading, that actually shows that the reading level of the text didn't make a difference in how much children gained from the opportunity to do that dyad or partner reading. We also have research that there are some grouping strategies that have support other than level-based grouping. For example, interest-based grouping appears to be an effective part of the concept-oriented reading instruction approach, or CORI, that has been tested in research and shown to be effective. And finally, if we only use level-based grouping, we do introduce the possibility of some negative self-perceptions for children, that they might realize they're in a relatively low group and they seem to always be in that group, and they may begin to worry about their own efficacy as a reader. Whereas if we mix the groups up, we use a variety of grouping strategies, we decrease the chances that that's going to happen for children. So to sum up, it's not that you should never use level-based grouping, it's that you shouldn't only use level-based grouping in working with our children.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and stop my share so that you can get it back up, Kathy.
There you go. Should be up. Are you able to see it, Laurel?
Yes, I am now.
Okay,
Thank you. It just
thank you.
taking a minute to get there. It was just taking a minute to get there.
That's okay.
So when we think about that, was part of the K-3 modules for Essential 3 for teachers and for educators. So when we think of this, guided reading, we really need to see as a teacher tool, and those levels are part of that. So thinking about reasons for not only using level-based grouping may or may not have an effect on some of the things that or requests that you may see from parents coming into the library. There's also a great article, and the link is on here, on guiding readers by interest, not level, which is some additional learning from the video as we saw. And obviously, if a parent or caregiver is insistent, you don't want to focus on that. You just want to be able to also support the fact that there's the other reasons why we want kids to have books that are not just at their level. There's lots of things parents can do and support reading with the student at home, or reading to the student at home. If there's a topic of interest that the student's not able to access the text independently, it's a fabulous opportunity for parents to read about that and build that knowledge that we know is also important and will have an impact on their reading development.
So we have a question in the chat box, and this is actually something that Lisa, Laurel, and I have debated back and forth a little bit. So the question is, we have patrons very frustrated because they can't find an accelerated reader level reading books at the library. Is there somewhere we can send them for help? So oftentimes the accelerated reader lists that students are given are developed at their school specifically, and for books that their school library might have, but we might not have them. But Laurel and Lisa, do you want to address this a little bit further here on
Yeah,
accelerated
it looks like Emily said that you can go to their website and check the levels.
Yeah, but often.
So I think what I might say here is, obviously it goes back to, if we've got parents or caregivers insistent that they want to check those out, right, use accelerated reader to look those pieces up. What frequently happens is that message comes from the school. There's a cultural focus at a building on AR. But what we really need to rely on is the research around motivation and engagement that is part of the essentials work for students. And we don't want to, if that's what parents want, we want to offer that. But I would also suggest that you offer some other book titles or an area for them to browse. And I would rely on the research, and when we start thinking about the essentials work and thinking about essential number 7, for example, which is intentional and ambitious efforts to build vocabulary and content knowledge. What parents need to know is building that content knowledge and vocabulary is a huge part of literacy development for their students. So that's one specific area in particular. The other piece, really, when we think about Essential 1 in motivation and engagement, is what is it the child wants to read? Is it a parent looking for a title because it's an AR book and so they're limiting selection for students? Or is there really a focus on what the student wants to read about whether it is or is not an AR title? So there's just some things to consider and to help support parents in learning about these other aspects of literacy. They're just as important, although they may, right, they may or may not take that advice. I'm also seeing in the chat this whole idea of grappling with whether to add more stickers to make book levels more obvious on the shelf. I would refer to the article that is attached here, Guiding Readers by Interest Not Level. That's a School Library Journal article, and it is a fabulous one to be able to think about why libraries need to be focused on the interest portion, not the level portion. And it may involve some learning for the community, depending upon, again, the culture of the schools that those students are coming from and those families are coming from.
Yeah, and I think something that you ladies said to me might be helpful to public libraries to hear, that it sounds like the reading level assignment, of course, is a teacher tool, but it's also something that the Department of Education is trying to move away from. Is that correct?
I think I think our intent really is to try to get back to the original intent and purpose of what levels were created for, and that really is as a teacher tool, as an instructional tool. And they've sort of manifested into, in some cases, limiting students' access to grade level texts. And if you look back to the video that we shared from Dr. Nell K. Duke, she offers a lot of reasons why we shouldn't only, even in the classroom study, only group by level. And those are all based on research. So what we're finding is those instructional ways of doing things in the classroom are then sort of coming into the home environment, right? So now we have kids who, in many cases, aren't able to read what they want to read, or they're pushed into places where they're reading non-grade level text again. And I know I've talked a little bit about that already, but we just really have some work to do in that area to move back to the original intent and purpose of the reading levels for guiding reading purposes. And so we know, and we've heard from librarians that you oftentimes do feel pressured, and we don't feel that it's your job to, change this. We're just hoping to provide you, if it doesn't feel right to you and you're constantly encountering, people coming in saying, well, where is this level and that level, and it's not feeling right to you. We just want you to know that we understand and we support you in, honoring the parents' request, but then also trying to open up again and move into that space of what are students interested in, and getting them back to having opportunities with grade level text or books that aren't on the AR list, right? So trying to get back to, again, making reading exciting, making it fun, helping, students, again, to go by what they're interested in, and to have like a clear purpose. So it's not the purpose of reading isn't only just because I'm going to get points on my AR. So, just thinking outside of that, that's kind of our intent.
Yes.
And I would say, in addition to that, Lisa, the other piece is the collaborative work with MAISA and GEL and Early Literacy Task Force, working with ISD and district literacy coaches on this same body of research is another piece the department is actively involved in, so that it's not just librarians hearing this piece. We have regional literacy leaders that have been developed and are supported through professional learning to continue to work with districts and classroom teachers and building principals on all of these pieces and there is a lot of work to do, but we're actively involved in that as well.
Mhm.
All right, well, thank you. And we could certainly have another entire webinar on guided reading and the great debate. But I'm going to go back and recap real quick what Lisa and Laurel are calling the big five here: phonic awareness, phonics, fluency, comprehension, and vocabulary. So when you think read by grade 3, ladies, these are really the big five, right? And
then
Yeah.
what's on the left is really the expansion of that, because for example, the M-STEP assessment also assesses writing, and that's not covered here in the big five. But if you look to the left, these are sort of the areas that the essentials have allowed us to really sort of take in deeper. So the literacy components on the right are sort of the compliance piece, but the commitment is over here on the left-hand side, taken from the essentials.
great. And just to recap, the law components are assessments, research-based instruction and intervention, reading improvement plans, family engagement, summer reading, and professional learning.
Mm-hmm.
So as we reflect on all this, you guys go back to your chat boxes and let us know one thing you'll try to take back to your library from today's discussion. BSDL writes that they're shifting towards a greater focus on interest for our youngest patrons. What can we do front lines to help them and their parents embrace literacy? So I would say a lot of what you're probably doing already with the 5 practices for every child ready to read. Have you thought of doing a literacy fair? Has anyone on today's webinar conducted a literacy fair? So just Sunday, here in the Lansing area, we had the Early Childhood Literacy Coalition Family Literacy Day. There are a number of libraries, Delta Township, East Lansing, Capital Area District Libraries, DeWitt Public Library, I'm forgetting Grand Ledge. They come together with some regional Great Start programs as well as a number of other entities, and put on a puppet show and music, and they have tables with crafts and displays, and they have literacy characters. So we had Llama Llama Red Pajama and Curious George and all those, and it was one big fair for the day. So that's one example of a literacy fair. Okay, we're getting some answers here in the chat box. Helping parents understand that guided reading level isn't the end-all be-all. So thank you for that comment, because that's exactly what I wanted to point out today. So Lisa and Laurel could tell you that these families are not coming in to the last day of school in 3rd grade and being informed that their child is being held back. They're actually being assessed within the first 30 days of school from kindergarten up on their reading level. And then they're being paired with these literacy coaches. They're being supported. They're having IRIT plans created for them to make sure that they can read by grade 3. So it is not something that is going to catch families off guard. And a lot of what public library is doing is already supporting read by grade 3, but of course there's a lot more we can always do. So some of our other comments, did I get that right, Lisa and Laurel? For the first 30 days, they are within the first 30 days, students are assessed starting in kindergarten.
Mm-hmm.
Great.
Yeah.
So, trying to catch up on the chat box here. And this is a good time for questions as well, if you have any questions. But a reminder that today's webinar, the slides are available here on a bit.ly, as well as our survey for today's webinar on Survey Gizmo. So please take a note of that. I'll also put a link in the chat box to the survey. I can pull that up here. You guys are active in our chat box, so some of our questions. Liz asks, do you think it is important that public librarians are familiar with specifics of the law, or just the pieces and strategies that you've highlighted here today? So Lisa or Laurel, do you have an answer for Liz?
I think, and Laurel, feel free to jump in. I think what we're really hoping is that we've provided some information to give you kind of an overview of the components of the law, so that if you are encountering patrons who are coming in because they need something specific around the law, you know, I need a specific book around this because it's in the reading improvement plan or something. We're not exactly sure how that's all going to tease out, but we're just hoping that you have some background knowledge and understanding of, you know, and some awareness. And then also we want you to know that we think you're important. We think the work that you're doing is important. Literacy is obviously very important to the three of us. It's a big goal for the state. Libraries are important. Access to books, very important. Access to high quality text, very important. Opportunities for families to engage in literacy, including the library, very important. So it might not be necessary for you to know the ins and outs of everything, but just an overall understanding of where Michigan is at with literacy, and just recognition that, you know, you're an important part of this overall initiative, and that we want to support you as well.
Well, yeah, thank you for that, because I know a lot of public librarians just have great respect for what our educators are doing in the classroom every day. I feel strongly that our essential literacy practices that we're getting from the Michigan Department of Education and the GELN, those are such great insight to what teachers are learning and how teachers are supporting literacy in the classroom. It's really been eye-opening. So I definitely suggest people go to literacyessentials.org to check those out. Just catching up on the chat box here, Emily mentioned that we're creating some support bags for parents who receive an IRIP for their child, hopefully to launch by the end of summer. They'll have support materials for each of the big 5 areas, and she also says that she liked the word board display idea and want to incorporate that with their summer reading program. So I love the idea of those support bags, Emily. If you want to send me details on that, I'm happy to share it out. So lots of great feedback here today. If we don't have any other questions, or if I've missed your question in the chat box, go ahead and repost that. But feel free to reach out to Lisa, Laurel, or myself. And our emails are on the screen here. Don't forget to do today's survey, and you are welcome to access the slides at any time. I'm not seeing any other questions. So thank you, Lisa and Laurel. Thank you so much for your time today with us public librarians.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you, Kathy.
Thank you. Everybody have a great day.
You too.
Thank you.